President Truman. And he offered me a 17-day world cruise to Yokohama. And then down at the bottom, he said, you got 24 hours to report to active duty. So I came back down to San Diego, and sure enough, the Navy dug one of World War II ships out of National City, and I think there was probably close to 6,400 Marines on there. And we spent 7 days putting all this stuff on there, and it was docked at North Island. And my mother, who was a spiritualist minister, the night we were getting ready to leave, it was kind of like when Johnny comes marching home, there's 2 or 3 bands, ticker tape and all that sort of stuff. And there was a Marine in front of me. There was 41 of us that didn't have uniforms. There was a Marine in front of me and one behind me. My mother ran over and she handed me a box of See's candy. I didn't know what to do. And these 2 Marines, boy, they really got on me. They said, Marines don't eat candy. It's called Bogey Bay. And I said, well, as soon as I get up on top of the ramp, I'll go across and chuck it in the water and write her a nice note. That never happened. I got up to the top and I went right straight down 7 stories. And that's what I say. However, there was only one mess hall in this ship. And they woke us up at about 4 in the morning. And it took about 45 minutes to get around to the mess hall. And the problem was when you got to the mess hall, there was usually 2 inches of bark from the floor. And as the ship would go back and forth, you can imagine what that was like. Everybody had to hang on the line to get through. Well, all they had was green eggs and green organic potatoes. And I couldn't eat, so about the 3rd day out, I remembered this box of candy. So I went down below and nobody was looking. And I found my rucksack and I thought to myself, Mommy, I don't know what you put in there, it's really kind of heavy. You know, maybe you had heavy walnuts or something. Well, I opened it up and guess what? It was a brand new Colt 45 up a minute. With a round in the chamber. Well, anyway, that weapon later saved my life, and I'll tell you about that. In any event, we left San Diego and we arrived in Japan, and the 41 of us that didn't have uniforms, they marched us up to an Army BX and we had to put on Class A uniforms, which are the pinks and greens. This would be considered Class A in the Air Force. In any event, they then marched us down to another hangar, and everybody got M1 rifles because they were pretty new. The guys that were a little larger, got BAR, Browning automatic rifles. That's what I got. And I didn't know what to do with it. They said, okay, don't worry about it. We'll teach you how to shoot it and how to strip it and all that sort of stuff on your way to Incheon. Well, none of us knew where Incheon was. We never heard of it. Anyway, we went out there and I shot it and everything. And the one thing they didn't tell me, though, was once you got in combat and you touched the trigger, the life expectancy was 7 seconds. So it didn't take me long to give it to somebody else. In any event, we landed at Incheon. And one of the interesting things at Incheon is the only place in the world, the harbor, as it comes out, is 37 feet tall. And the Higgins boats could only go 3 miles an hour. And there was Higgins boats all over the place there, and people had to walk in. And I finally got up to the place, the town. There wasn't too much going on by the time I got up there. But General MacArthur split the battalion. Half went up to Tempo so that he could get aircraft in there and get supplies. And the other half, we had to go to K3, which was 25 miles south of there. And that's where I went. Along the way, we got overwhelmed with, from some North Koreans with mortars. And the first one went off. There was a cave about 20 yards from me. And believe me, I was quite getting into that cave. Well, the guys told me I came out faster than I went in. The problem was it was stuffed with spider webs. And I had more fear of spiders than I did North Koreans. And even we finally got to K3, and we had 10-man tents there. And inside we had GIs as the security guys, and we had the South Koreans outside of there, about 1,000 yards out. Well, the North Koreans would come in and kill the South Koreans, change uniforms. What happened was, I still think that I never slept in Korea, because I was laying on my bunk, my 45 was on my chest, my finger was in the trigger guard, and it was around in the chamber. And what happened was, I don't know, people said I went to sleep when I really wasn't. When I looked up, there was a guy up there coming down with a bayonet, and I just rolled. I was the first person I ever killed. But I woke everybody up, and all 10 of us made it through that little situation. We left there and we were headed up north, towards the north part of North Korea. And every night we stopped, we'd get a CIA guy in there, and he had to be a captain or a major. And this major came in one night and he yelled, "Where's your company commander?" Well, all company commanders are second lieutenants, and they're not too sharp out there in combat. And so this major said, "I want 14 Marines." Well, what was it? It still gets to me, I almost cried. The whole company stood up. And it really made you feel bad, but it was just incredible. Well, the guy checked off 14 guys, and I was one of them. And we went up 18 miles to a North Korean place up there that had all their munitions and whatnot. We blew them all up and everything, and we got out of there and started home. We got down to about 17 miles, and there was a path going up the side of this hill. And we started up, and the North Koreans started laying mortars there. And a mortar went off in front of me, killed 2 Marines in front of me, one behind me, blew me over this cliff. And I went down about maybe 35 feet or so, and I was unconscious. And when I came through, I could hear the North Koreans up there talking. I knew they were desecrating everybody, getting their guns and everything. So I waited until it was light enough, and I crawled out into some bushes, and they didn't catch me. The following evening, I crawled out of there. I made it back to our lines, which is the Marine Corps lines, and that was a real problem there. Marines had a tendency to shoot first and talk later. It was really tough getting through there. But I got through there, and eventually we made it all the way up to Hageroo. Hageroo was a little mountain village up there. It was about 14 miles below the Chilchosin Reservoir. And the North Marines up there, the 7th Marines were trying to get out of there because there was 2 divisions of Chinese soldiers there. And there was roughly 122,000 in each division. And you can't imagine, we were really talked by these guys. They came down all the way to Hageroo. We had a Marine Corps colonel there. I'll never forget it because there's sometimes humorous no matter what. And he was standing up on a box with a megaphone. He was going around in circles and he was saying, "Marines, Marines, Marines, you guys can't realize what's going on right here." He said, "You are surrounded by 122,000 Chinese soldiers. You guys can shoot in any direction." And of course, everybody was happy and excited. We all made it out of there, not all, but most of us did. I was one of the last 3 Marines to leave there, and it was 9 miles down to Coteau-Rie. Down there was a runway, and there was 3 DC-3s down there. And there was a tech sergeant standing up on the wall. There was only 3 Marines coming down his room. And he yelled at me and he says, "Who are you?" And I said, "PFC 100. He says, "You're now a corporal, get up there." So we got up there and he says, "Look," he says, "we got 4 aircraft here, and they're loaded with dead Marines and Marines leaving in hospitals." He says, "I want you to take this half track and put it on one side of the runway." He said, "Because the Chinese have the other end of the runway only 2,000 feet away, and they need support to get off the ground." So we moved the half track down on one side, and we rolled 50-gallon drums of gas and put them in the half track because we thought we'd get out of there. It was 75 miles down to hanging on. Any event, one of the guys didn't want to wait for us. Well, first of all, let me say, one of the captains, who was first lieutenant, then jumped out of his airplane and he yelled at me. He said, "Follow me." And there was a Corsair parked about 50 yards away. And he ran up there and thank God I ran around the back of the airplane. He got in the cockpit and next thing I know, all 6 machine guns went off. He said, "Get your 3, the other 2 Marines, we're going to move it down and put it on the other side of the runway. That way we have 7 machine guns to get these aircraft on." Well, the first Gooneyberg guy didn't wait. He took off and the Chinese shot him down, killed everybody on board. So the Marine got up there, came back, there was no doors on these Gooneybergs, and he gave me one of these little things. He says, "Get your 2 Marines and get in here." And I looked at him and I said, "No, sir." I said, "If you don't get out of here, you won't get out of here." I said, "Thanks for whatever you've done." And I saluted him. Well, he saluted me, and I've never had an officer salute me that slow. And he was crying at the same time. But he took off. We gave him all the firepower we could. And he turned around and he came back and he wagged his wings, and that was the last I saw of him. But I want to stop right there. 9 years later, I was in the Air Force. And I was stationed at March Air Force Base over here, flying B-47s, which is on the end over there. And when I got to Kansas, I was a problem child. I did not want to fly B-47s. And I told the squadron commander, I walked in, ripped my wings off, threw them on his desk, and so he said, "Well, you're going to get every detail that's going to come along," and it did. I painted the wall, and I did all kinds of things. We went down a Little Rock, and the flying part was down there, and I had the same problem there. The first mission we had, there was 2 young lieutenants that had $2,500 in the V-47, but they wanted to upgrade to an aircraft commander. And I hadn't flown at all. I had that first mission I flew, the one where I flew my wings on the squadron commander's desk. And again, I didn't fly at Little Rock at all, other than that one mission. I was really a problem case. We got to March, and there the squadron commander put me in a brace and walked around me and spit on me, and he gave me every kind of a problem you could think of. I painted the walls and did all kinds of things, and he called me in on a Monday morning. He says, "Look, Lieutenant," he said, "I want you and the officers club. Women are having a party on Friday night, and you're on the desk to put all the stuff on the walls and things." And so we did that, and about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, this lieutenant colonel came in a suit that I'm in, and he looked around and got 3 pitchers of beer and said, "You guys come over and sit down." There were 6 of us at this table. And he says, "I know all of you, but I don't know this guy, but I know who he is." He was pointing right at me. And there was a second lieutenant sitting next to me, and he did a stupid thing. He asked his colonel what his merit badges were on his chest. You just don't do that as a second lieutenant. And all 6 of us, or 5 of us, looked at him and said, "My God, you can't do that." And this guy stood up and he says, "Colonel, what's that top merit badge?" We all just said, "Oh my God, you can't believe it." Well, the colonel was very nice. He said, "I'm going to tell you, I got that as a Distinguished Flying Cross, and I got it while I was in Korea." And he said, well, the guy said, this stupid lieutenant said, "How did you get it?" So he started talking, and I stood up with my glass of beer, and I saluted the colonel, and I said, "Colonel, I'll tell you what, I'd like to finish your story." And he looked at me like he'd kill me, and I finished the story all the way down, and he stood up and he was crying. He couldn't believe that I was one of them. that was there in Korea. And he said, I want you here with your wife that night. And he says, I want you in my office Monday morning. Well, he turned my whole career around in the Air Force. When I come back to Korea, the three of us made it down to Hanyang, and we ran out of gas about 3-4 miles from there, and there's probably 100,000 South Korean people trying to get out of the harbor. But we had guys in the harbor blowing up the harbor around, and it was 50 below zero. And there was a small 19-foot boat out there, and he was picking up these guys that were floating what am I trying to say? The blows up out there in the harbor. And I took my BAR and I fired 20 rounds over his head. And he came in and he says, are you Marines? And we all yelled yes. He says, jump. Well, it was about 8 feet down, and there was 50 below zero, but we all jumped. And I came back up with my rifle, so that was pretty good. We got in his little boat, and we picked up all the guys there, and we started out. And the guy who was driving his little boat said to me, he says, do you know what day it is? And I said, no. I said, what day is it? He said, well, tonight is Christmas Eve. And that was a shot. So we turned, all the big boats were gone. So we went down the coast of South Korea until we almost ran out of gas. And we pulled in the shore. There was the LSI sitting on the shoreline there. And we pulled in, and there was 19 of us in this boat. And there was an incident on this LSI. That's a big boat that has tanks and trucks and whatnot in it, and gasoline. And it was the only gas port on the east side of the Korea. And he was so thrilled to see us because there was 19 of us on there. And we were rolling these 50-gallon drums off and putting them on a truck. And it was 45 miles south of there. The first time out, the North Koreans blew up 2 of the trucks. And a week later, these guys were telling me, they said, Hunter, you've got to go down here. He said, they have hot meals and hot water. So I went down, and I'd never seen a Corsair or a fighter land on a runway, and the runway is metal with holes in it. And it was like if you're going out on the water and rather speak, you're going to find a lot of water behind you in the air. So each Corsair that landed left a big trail behind it, but it was wood. And I didn't know that. And I was standing out there, and this lieutenant got out of the aircraft and walked over and said, who the heck are you? And I told him, I was so dirty and I hadn't taken a bath in 3 months. He said, where are you from? And I told him, Coronado, California. He said, did you ever work in a flower shop? And I said, yes, sir. He said, I'll bet you worked in Perkins Flower Shop. And it was up on 9th and Orange Avenue in Coronado. And our truck was back behind the bank, and we used to go through the bank. We'd always believe it or right. And this guy was a young guy, and he was a pilot. He says, I want you to come with me. So I went with him, and we went down and we met the squadron commander. And he told him all about it. So he called the shirts up there. And he said, look, take this guy down, get him cleaned up, and give him a hammer and a screwdriver, and I want you to go out there and knock all this mud off the aircraft. Well, that's what I did. And I got into the air wing that way, and I eventually became a plane captain, and I was in foreign heaven. Well, I came home in November of 1952. I'd been in Korea for 3 years at that point. I used the GI Bill, and I went to San Diego State, and government paid for everything. One of my fraternity brothers was working for the Bank of America, and I got a job. Actually, I bought a job from him, $175. That was a lot of money in those days. Anyway, then I started flying 5 nights a week during the week, giving stuff up to people in Los Angeles. And after about 2 years, I knew most of the pilots that were flying back and forth. And I asked him one night, I said, how long does it take to get over here in this right-hand seat? And they both said, oh, 11 to 15 years. I said, oh my God. I said, how much money do you guys make? The next morning I was in the ROTC office. And 1 year later, I was in the Air Force. And I was at Williams Air Force Base, flying this F-86 right behind you here with the teeth on it. I finally got out of there, and the Chief of Staff of the Air Force decided that one of the problems was they were losing B-47s like you can't imagine. That B-47 over there on the end of the table still holds the world's record for the most aircraft lost in plane training accidents. And what they did, he said, we're going to take your whole squadron. We were 86 air pilots, and they put us all in staff. And I had to go to watch Wichita, Kansas, and I said I didn't fly because I couldn't stand it. I went down to Little Rock, I had one ride, and when I got to March Air Force Base, and I got the job of cleaning up the unit there, and the guy that, the Lieutenant Colonel, saved my life, and I started out as a co-pilot, and it took $2,500 to upgrade to a pilot. I upgraded with $400. And I got, they closed down March Air Force Base at that time, and I wound up at Little Rock, and I had the only all-lieutenant crew in 8th Air Force, and it was really exciting. And one of my buddies lived 2 doors down from me, and his wife and my wife, we played bridge 2 or 3 times a week. And he called me one day, I was in alert down at the alert facility. He says, Dean, you gotta get up here. He said, there's a top secret message on my desk. And he says, you need to come up and read it. Well, I went up there, and the Air Force wanted fighter pilots to go to someplace in the world and fly World War II fighters. Well, boy, it took me 45 minutes to fill out all that paperwork, but I was really excited. Well, 3 months went by, and I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't make it. Well, I was coming down, I was going to land on B-47, and when I got close to the landing, the airport said, so Lieutenant Hunter, as soon as you land, report to the wing commander. So I queried both of my navigator and my co-pilot to see if they'd done something that I didn't know about. So I got up there, and they gave me a cup of coffee, and I went in this room with a brand new colonel, wing commander, and this other major. And we talked for, say, 35, 40 minutes, and we talked football, fishing, weather, and the guy said, would you be interested in flying in a foreign country? Well, I said, absolutely, yes. And so he said, okay, they all left, and I went back onto the squadron, and I didn't really know what was going on. Well, now 2 months later went by, now it's been 5 months, same thing happened on final approach. This time, the command post said, Lieutenant Hunter, as soon as you land, the wing commander wants to see you immediately. I thought, oh my God, it must have left me just standing there. So I went up there, and the colonel said, just a minute, Lieutenant. He said, I've got to go over and open this safe. And he had a set of orders in there from the CIA. And DIA, pardon me. And I never heard of the DIA. And he showed me the orders. He says, you're out of here. He said, I want you can't tell your wife, I want you to go home, pack up everything. In the morning, you go uptown and get on a commercial airline and go to Wichita, Kansas. And when you get up there, get a taxi and go down to the train station, and you'll have a key and a locker number. I did all of that. I couldn't tell my wife. I just said goodbye. I'll see you around, honey. And I said, if you ever see the wing taking off, get out of here with the kids. In any event, I got to Wichita, and I went down and got a ticket, and I wound up in Blue Eye, Missouri. Is there anybody here from Blue Eye, Missouri? It's a very small town. All they had was a gas station, a grocery store, and a Greyhound bus depot. So I went over to Greyhound Bus Depot, and my order said I had a key. I opened another locker, and this was getting kind of exciting because this didn't happen at the airport. So I opened this other one up, and sure enough, there was my name there, and I had a bus ticket down to Fort Walton Beach, Florida. I'd never heard of that. 18 hours later, I got down there and I got off this bus, and there was a young sergeant there, and he had a little thing. He says, "Are you Lieutenant Hunter?" And I, "Captain Hunter." And I said, "Yes." He said, "Get in my Jeep." I did. And I said, "Where are we going?" He said, "Eglin Air Force Base." I said, "What's on Eglin Air Force Base?" And he said, "You don't know?" And I said, "No." He says, "It's the largest Air Force installation in the Air Force. There were 23 separate runways there, and you're doing another 23. Well, he took me up there, dropped me off, and so a whole week I got briefed with top secret junk. And then I went down to Hobart 9, and I got to fly this T-28 right here, and I still love this little machine. What happened was, the Air Force took that T-28, it was a trainer, and it had a 700 horsepower engine in it, and they took that engine out and put a 1400 in there, and I want to tell you, it was incredible. I couldn't tell you, it's one of my favorite airplanes. The only problem was, when they put this big engine in there, they didn't modify the firewall. The temperature inside the aircraft was 150 degrees, and I flew 166 combat missions in that baby, so it was really, you can't imagine what it was like, but it was great to fly. We flew off jungle airstrips all the time. If any of you buy my book, you'll find some pictures in there. One of the pictures in there is a monkey, and we caught him out of the jungle. We straightened him out. He became very, very nice. He fell in love with me, and every time I walked out of that tent, he was right ahead of me, and he'd run to the airplanes and turn on over me. And then I'd point to one airplane, and he'd jump up on a wing and jump in the cockpit, and he flew 55 missions with me. And he was a great person. One of the jungle airstrips that we flew out of quite frequently in Vietnam was way out in the jungle, and it was the Army held it. They were flying these things right here. And they had a mascot, and it was a 241-pound Bengal tiger. They kept him chained outside their 3 tents that they turned into a drinking place. And at night they let him loose in the 3 tents, and he liked gin. So we had a big bowl there, and he would drink gin every night. And he had a terrible halitosis. But you could pet him, he was really nice. And all the Army guys wanted our pictures behind the bar, which saved so many of their lives. Well, we told him that we didn't want to use their mascot. So we sent our intel officer out in the jungle, and he came back 3 days later, and he pulled up in front of the club, and he started unloading his snake. And he unloaded his snake, and he unloaded his snake. The snake was 19 feet long, and we figured it weighed somewhere between 800 and 1,200 pounds. Well, that became our mascot, with the exception of one of our pilots was scared to death, and threw guys on the ground and held him down and put the snake on top of him. In any event, every night the intel officer would go over and we built a little chicken wire place for the snake. And we take him out every night, and there was a fence patty there, and we let him swim around for 35, 40 minutes. And he picked his head up. His head was giant. He walked him back and put him in. Well, the only thing that saved this guy's life was the intel officer went over one night, picked him up, his head with a snake thread. And he got 2 coils around him. It took 6 of us to get that snake off. And I didn't know the snake could scream, but you could have heard him a half a mile away. But anyway, that was and the funny thing is, I think 2 weeks ago, Wednesday, this gentleman walked up to me. He said, "You know, you look like you were in Vietnam." And I said, "Yes." He said, "I'll bet you were down in Delta." And I said, "Yes." He said, guess what? I said, he said, your snake is still there. Anyway, Vietnam was a, I don't know how to explain it. Let me explain it by this hat right here. This is a commando hat right here. And you'll notice there's a thing around it. Well, the deal was you couldn't have a thing around here until you got a bullet in one of your aircraft. Well, every flight by this aircraft was 8 to 10 bullet holes, with the exception of me. And I flew 15 missions and I couldn't get a thing here. And I finally told my buddy, we were going out to us, I said, look, we're coming back from Saigon. I'm going to land on the road down here if I don't get a bullet hole. And I had two 38s on me, a grease gun, and a bullet down my back. I said, I'm going to land on that road down there. I'm going to take my 38 and punch a hole in the back. But I got a bullet through it. So anyway, I got my little thing, and that's what we all wore these. I'm at that point. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Don't be afraid.
Hey, Bill Bramer, I arrived a few minutes late. Did you tell them about your recovery of the B-47 spin?
Oh, yeah, I guess I can tell you about that aircraft. That aircraft, all SAT runways are 13,000 feet long. And this aircraft was designed to fly with 125,000 pounds. We were on alert at 222,000. And every time you went down a runway, I watched that 13,000, I was a co-pilot then, watched that 13,000 foot marker go by, and we had to pop the wheel, get it pop up in the air, and pray that it would go. We had B-47s out at that time all over the world in classified bases. We had 19 of them around Russia that the Russians didn't know they were there. But coming home, we're out there on 90-day missions, and then we get to come back home to our families, etc. And I took off one day, and then B-47, and the first thing that happened, I got airborne, but the gear wouldn't come up. And I told the co-pilot, he said, close the gear up. So I do take the aircraft off, and I'll see if I can't get it up. Well, I did. I grabbed my handle, and there's a little detent with a little thing in there, and the gear came up. Well, the two guys ahead of me, I had to really race to catch up with them. And one of the guys told me, he said, you know, the colonel from Little Rock is going to nail you when you get home because you recycled that gear. I said, well, what can I do? So anyway, we got about 200 miles out from the course, and it was down nighttime. And the thunderstorms out there were up to 70,000 feet. And only one tanker showed up. We needed two tankers to get us enough gas to get home. Well, the two guys took most of the gas ahead of me, and I got sloppy thirds. And I backed off the tanker, now we're 22,000 feet. And my first thing that happened was my radio quit working. So I couldn't call the aircraft ahead of me. And I could hear the aircraft leader talking to the second guy, be sure this is a bad one, turn left because it's going up to 70,000. Well, I firewalled my aircraft, and I turned left, and the next thing that happened, 10 seconds later, I'm at 44,000 feet, upside down, in an inverted spin. Well, you can't imagine, everything that was in that aircraft was all over the cockpit. Coffee cups, trucks, I mean, everything. I got it recovered at about, I'm going to say 30,000 feet. And I got the nose down and over controlled. I went into a spin again. And I recovered at close to 1,500 feet. And both my navigator and my co-pilot were screaming at me. They wanted to bail out. I said, no, do not bail out. I said, because remember when we went up, the air inside those thunderstorms is anywhere from 800,000 feet per minute. I said, think about it when we wound up on top. When we went into that big storm, 10 seconds later, we're 44,000. I said, you don't want to bail out. So we stayed and I told him, I said, once we bailed out, once we recovered down below, we made it to I told my navigator, I said, Ed, just give me a 270 the aircraft so I can just get some land. I said, as soon as we get to Florida, we're going to bail out. Well, by the time we got to Florida, we were flying, so we climbed up. We're at 3,000 feet. So we climbed up and I couldn't talk to the guys in front of me. So I told the navigator, I said, Ed, I said, there's an emergency parachute thing down here. We got here. I take that little Air Force radio, there's one in there and you can pull it out. So he got out of the seat and came back and handed me the radio and the things out here. And I got a radio, I can't even remember now where it was in North Carolina, answered me. I told him what had happened. And I said, there's a line of thunderstorms out here and I need to get through them. I don't want to go in. And so he started talking to me. Well, I lost track of him. And I got up to these thunderstorms. And my navigator finally got his radar working. So he got us through the thunderstorms. And the next thing I did, I was using emergency procedures. I got Memphis, Tennessee to answer me. And I told him what happened. I said, I want descent to Little Rock. Well, that was about 170 miles out. And I started down. And I got down to about 3,000 feet. And the command post was screaming at me. They were going to launch the tanker and they wanted me to hit it, and they wanted to talk to Boeing up there to see what was wrong. And I called them back and I said, I'll be on the ground in 5 minutes. Pretty soon I said, I'll be on the ground in 3 minutes. Then pretty soon they're screaming at me. I said, I'll be on the ground in a minute and a half. Well, I came down and all of a sudden, I lost all my controls. The aircraft was about, maybe 70 feet in the air, hit the ground, and then it bounced up inches 4 and 5, and fell off the aircraft and twirled around the runway. And I came back up again, probably to 100 feet, and it came back down, and the right wing broke off, and came around and launched into the back end of the aircraft. And that was kind of an exciting experience. Okay, Bob, are you going to ask a question? Or are you awake?
I'd like to make a comment, not ask a question.
I want you to know this.
I had the pleasure of working for the last 6 years here at the Air Museum, 5 years with the Colonel. If you want to get a book about somebody's life and what he did and what he told you today, there's so much more in his book that you'll never be able to set the book down when you start reading it. I have great respect for this gentleman. At age 90, he's done it all.